Hi guys, so we're comparing digital versus traditional watercolors. Here's what I like and don't like about them. First of all, flexibility. I like the flexibility about digital watercolors. The fact that you can go back and change things is very helpful, which is about a matter of fact about anything digital art. Real life watercolor can be pretty fun, but also a little unforgiving once everything is set. With digital watercolor, you don't have to worry about paper texture so much, although you still have to have good brushes to have a realistic effect. If you go back and try to change things in real life watercolors, you may have an undesirable effect that completely changes the look of your painting, and then it might start to look overworked, so just be careful. On that note, let's talk about the paint cost. For digital watercolor, as long as you used or bought the right program or item, you're pretty much set for life and don't have to rebuy things. Unless you're like me, who gets addicted to finding the most perfect brush ever and keeps buying new products. So I bought so many Procreate watercolor brushes, but now I just mostly stick to the AF watercolor brushes you'll see below in my description, although I still will use a couple other ones for different effects too. With in real life watercolors, if you're really going for quality, they can get pretty expensive. I'm talking like $16 for one tube of 5 milliliters of paint. That's kind of small, but honestly they last a long time. When I was a poor student in college and I was learning oil paint, I pretty much just bought 3 primary colors in white to start out with. So if you're doing the same thing with watercolors, it could be a good way to learn color mixing at the same time and also to have it stay affordable. But there's many student grade options as well if you're just getting started, so it doesn't have to be super expensive. Buying different odd colors of paint and shades and stuff can get pretty addicting also if you're not too careful. Alright, paper cost. Let's not forget that. It'll definitely cost you if you're trying to go for a better grade paper. Paper can make or break your results in real life watercolor. You can become really frustrated if you get the best paint but crappy paper, and it won't give you a realistic gauge on how well you're doing with learning watercolor. I would suggest starting small with a little watercolor notebook that is great quality. I'm an Archie's nerd for paper. I don't know if that's even how you pronounce it, but there's other options that are good too. Hot, cold, or rough press is really up to your preference. Just try them all. With digital watercolor, paper texture is something that can be replicated, but I found the 2 programs that make it look the best are Realistic Paint Studio and Rebel. I've heard Adobe Fresco being mentioned as well as being good, but I don't really use that one that much. I find that when you use digital paper texture in Procreate, it kind of honestly starts looking artificial, especially when you're trying to use it for printing. I make a really light texture when I'm using Procreate because otherwise it'll start to just gray out your colors. Okay, let's talk about expectancy versus unpredictability. What I like about digital watercolors is just the predictability and planning that you can do to know exactly what you want your finished product to look like. Rather, in real life watercolors, there's always an off chance that something will end up looking differently than what you thought. Almost always, honestly. Although that could be a positive thing. They definitely dry out a little differently than what you initially put on. So just keep aware of that. Some cons about digital watercolor in this area is that it doesn't have the unpredictability that real life watercolors have. So far, with the different digital programs I've used that simulate real watercolor, some of them have really given me a real feel of watercolor, but not the same effect. It's been pretty close though. The best ones I've used so far are, again, Rebel, Realistic Paint Studio, and the AF brushes that I mentioned before with Procreate. However, when I'm really just craving to express my feelings, I prefer to do that in real life watercolors for the expressiveness and just unpredictability. So I guess that's another pro in that area too. I love using salt, alcohol, and whatever other techniques that you could do in real life that you can't exactly replicate with digital watercolors. At least not yet. But you can experiment more easily. Overall, I prefer digital watercolors when I mostly focus on the end result and if I know exactly the look I'm more so going for. It's also good when doing large projects for others that might need a lot of changes. It's less cost of materials for them too, but a slightly different look. And I will say that it does have a little unpredictability, but kind of not in the good way. More so when you're just trying to learn or experiment what to do or what brushes to use. But thank God for the undo button. Last thing is about time. Digital watercolors can be very fast compared to traditional watercolors where you have to wait until each layer is dry. But sometimes that's okay. That's how you get cool effects in traditional watercolor. And you can lightly use a blow dryer to make the drying process go faster. All of this is really up to your preference. Alright, that's it. Thanks for listening to my spiel. Hope you learned something. Keep drawing and painting. Which kind of watercolor do you prefer? Let me know down in the comments. Bye.